Are you looking for tips to secure that next teaching job? In this video, I will share 5 tips that you can utilize to help you in that upcoming interview. So stick around. Hi, I'm James, and in this video, I'm going to share 5 tips that you can utilize in a teacher interview based on my experience as a teacher and as a former district level instructional specialist and campus assistant principal. So let's get started. Tip number 1, do your homework. So you want to spend a couple hours researching the campus that you're interested in. This goes to the location, the community it serves, the student demographics, the student programs, and or accountability ratings, just to name a few. Now, you certainly don't need to memorize all those things, but why would you do this? Well, number one, you have to assume that your competitors aren't doing that. And if they are, that you're doing that at a level that they aren't going to do it. So say, for example, as you're doing your homework and you're looking at, student demographics and student data, you notice that the campus has a high number of English language learners and students that receive special education services. Now, when you compare those two student groups to other student groups, you notice academically, they do not perform as well. So you might potentially be asked a question, describe your experience working with various student populations and or what you would do to help those two student groups achieve at the level that the other student groups are achieving at. Additionally, if you're not asked a question like that, but as during the interview process, one of the things that you might be able to speak to, hey, I have experience working with Ls and I noticed that this campus has a high L population, I can talk about the experience at that point. So you definitely want to do your homework, get some background information so that way you can speak to and or ask questions about the campus during the interview process. It also gives the committee or the interviewer the perception that you are genuinely interested in the campus. Tip number 2, speak about your experience as it relates to education. Now, I recommend only talking about your experience in regard to the degrees that you have, as well as your teaching experience. So if you're a novice, you can talk about your student teaching experience, or if you have at least 1 year plus, then you can talk about the courses that you've taught, the subject areas, the grade levels, etc. Now, if you're going to share something personal, then perhaps share as it relates to your career in education. So for example, my mother's a teacher and that's sort of what got me into, that's what got me into teaching. Also, my father was in the army, and so my family, we lived in different countries, and I was able to experience different nationalities and different cultures. So as a result of that, based on my cultural awareness, I can bring that into my classroom and demonstrate cultural responsibility and being culturally responsive in my classroom. Now, you're more than welcome to share personal information. An interviewer can't ask you personal questions such as your age, your family, sexual orientation, things like that. So it really is up to you what you share. But again, I highly recommend sticking to just talking about your experience in education. Tip number 3, you want to have a general idea of the classroom flow and policies and procedures that are going to be established in your classroom. So what do I mean by this? You might be asked to describe the bell-to-bell instruction in your class. So how does class start? What are the students doing? What are you doing? How do you transition from activity to activity? What are you doing in the middle? How do you end the class? Do the students just all get up and start gossiping and talking to one another, or do you have them all sit in their seat and you dismiss the class when the bell rings? So that's something that you want to think about. Also, how do you handle students that are continually and consistently disruptive to the learning environment? What do you do? What's your step process for that? Do you just immediately write them up and kick them out of class and send them to the office? Or do you have a system in place to deal with that? Also, how do you communicate with families or parents or guardians in regard to students, not just the bad things, but also the good things? So those are a couple of things to keep in mind in regard to your general classroom flow. I'm going to put a link in the description with additional questions that you can utilize to help you during the interview process. Tip number 4, avoid the negativity. You want to make sure that you avoid talking about former colleagues, administrators, students, anything negative. Just don't do it at any cost, because it does not look good to the interview or interview committee if you're sitting there talking negatively about your former campus. Now, you might be asked to talk about an experience in which there was conflict between you, a colleague, a parent, a student. You can always still talk about that in general without going into specific detail. So again, just make sure that you don't fall into the trap of speaking negatively about anybody, because it doesn't look good. Tip number 5, last but not least, sell yourself. So you might get asked at the end of the interview to share anything that you may have forgotten or to ask some questions. You generally want to ask some questions. But if you're given the opportunity, or even if not, and you're trying to close out the interview, Hopefully, before you even started the interview, you thought of some qualities and experiences that make you the best candidate for that position. So that way, when it does come to the end, you can share that. So, for example, are you a team player? Do you have an array of instructional strategies that you know engage and motivate students in learning? Do you continually seek to grow and develop your craft as an educator? Are you willing to provide professional development based on your own learning to the staff at your campus? The list of experiences and qualities that you can pull from is endless. You just want to make sure that you generally present them as such. Well, that's it. I hope at least there was one thing that you were able to take away from this video. If there was something that you were wondering about that I didn't talk about or address in the video, then leave that in the comment section and I will do my best to get back with you. If there's anything about the video that you liked, then make sure to hit that like button and or subscribe so that way you can bond with James. As always, thanks for watching.